Some people think we should quit romanticizing early retirement and maybe even quit romanticizing retirement entirely. So, what do I think about that? Should we be doing it? Are we doing more harm than good by encouraging people to retire as soon as they're financially independent? Are we doing more harm than good by encouraging people to retire early or even retire at all? Let's talk about this because I've been a financial advisor for 20 years. I've done over 1,000 YouTube videos, really with the idea of encouraging people to be thoughtful and deliberate about when they decide to retire. So I want to talk about this topic. So part of where this is coming from, this is the average life expectancy for somebody once they reach 65 years old. And you can see for the men, they have a 50% chance of living to 84. They have a 25% chance of living to 91. Uh, and the women have a couple more years than that. So what's the big deal? That's a lot of time in retirement. And isn't that sufficient? Let's talk about the science and then let's talk about the qualitative, the feeling side of this, the science of this. And recent research has just come out on this. This is Stanford Medicine News Center, and there's a doctor, we're going to talk about him, a researcher at Stanford. And the article says time marches on predictably, but biological aging is anything but constant, according to a new Stanford study. The Washington Post jumps in and tells us more. And the article is called Feeling Old? Your Molecules Change Rapidly Around the Age of 44 and 66 years old. So do we have as much time as we think? Maybe not. Let's see what it says. The scientist here, Michael Snyder, who's a geneticist at Stanford University, who co-wrote this study. Obviously, you change throughout your entire life, but there are two major periods when there are a lot of changes. One is when people hit their mid-40s, and one is when they hit their 60s. Now, I've gone through both of those. I just turned 60. And I can tell you in my mid-40s, you know what? I no longer felt like a kid anymore. I could feel that rapid change. And I'm already starting to feel some of the rapid change of my early 60s. And unfortunately, I think that's going to accelerate. So I personally made the decision to retire because I want to make sure that if my day comes tomorrow, that, you know, I looked and I wasn't trying to take every last dollar off of the table, but instead I was trying to optimize on life, not optimize on my bank account. This is how many people actually get to retire early. So 40 to 44, you wouldn't expect many people are retired, and they're not. It's about 1% of the U.S. population. 45 to 49, it's about 2%. 50 to 54, it's at 6%. 55 to 59, now we start to see an uptick, 11%. And that's one of the things I'd like to see for people that are able to retire in their mid to late 50s, for people that are able to retire in their 60s, for them to think about it. And if it's right for them to do it and to encourage that. I've got more thoughts on that in a second. 60 to 64, this is, when people start retiring in earnest, it's about 32% of us. 65 to 69, still almost a third of people are still working. 70% are retired. And then it goes to about 83% of people retired 70, 74. And then almost 90%, 75 and above. And for those people, for the 12, 15, 17% that's still working after 69, I hope that the vast majority of those folks are working because they really love it. I know some people have to work because they need the money. But for folks in that category that have the money and could retire, I hope they're choosing to continue to work because they really love it. I will caution here. Oftentimes people tell me, hey, as a financial advisor for over 20 years and help guide hundreds of people into retirement, it's not unusual for somebody to tell me, and frankly, it's usually men, hey, Azul, I cannot think of anything that I would do that would be more fun than working, even though they might not like their job. And I think that's sad. I think there's homework in front of us to do that. And there's two books I'll recommend. One is From Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks, which talks about transitioning from a doer to kind of a manager to more of a mentor and giving back. That'll help you think of some things. And then there's a book, it's got a strange title, Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. Both of those books will spur some thoughts for you. If you're in that category and you say, "I don't necessarily love my job, but I don't know what else I would do," the answer to that is not to keep working, but to do some homework to find out what else you'd like to do. Okay, enough said on that. We just talked about what percent of Americans are retired. Now, what's the healthy life expectancy in the United States? How long can you expect to live before you have a serious health issue? Cancer diagnosis, diagnosed with coronary heart disease, you have a heart attack, a stroke, something like that. How long can we expect that period? It's not as long as you think. In Southeast Asia with Japan, Singapore, Korea, they get almost, over 73 years, almost 75 years. So that's a fair amount of time of healthy retirement time. But let's look at the other end of this chart, which is put data from the World Health Organization. It was aggregated in this easy to use format by Jeff Nobbs. But here in the US, that's just 66.1 years. That's 13 months after when the average person retires. And I don't know about you, but I'm hoping for, I'm praying for a lot more than 13 months of healthy time in retirement. I want to really savor it. I want to enjoy it all. I want to take full advantage of what I call the youth of our senior years. This is the youth of my senior years. At some point, I'm going to be in the old age of my senior years. And I want to be able to look back then and say, I squeezed all the juice out of life that I could. I want you to be able to say the same thing. And unfortunately, that was one of my findings as a financial advisor is it can be difficult to get people to actually make that transition because it's not easy. It's a difficult transition into retirement for everybody. I've been doing this professionally for 20 years, and I still have my ups and downs. And it's a difficult transition because it's a big life change. Just like if you left home to go to trade school or to college, that was a huge life change. I remember when my oldest daughter left to go to college, and everything she owned was in her 2 suitcases, and she didn't know anybody at the university that she was going to, and it took courage for her to walk out that front door as we left and to say goodbye to her family, to say goodbye to our family dog, who she was really close to. It's the same thing in retirement. It's a big transition. But don't let that transition stop you because unless you're going to work until the day you die, at some point, we all have to go through that transition. So why not do it when we can transition into a period of our life where there's a lot of things we can do. We can do all those things that we told ourselves all our life. Okay, I mentioned when do Americans lose their health? It's very similar in the UK. This is from the Financial Times. Fewer than 1 in 10 men in the UK are likely to reach their retirement in good health. I think their full retirement age, like here in the US now, is about 67 years old. So it's not much different there. And then I want to share, what are we holding off retirement for? For many of us, it's to save more money. But have you really thought through how much money you need to retire? And you don't want to retire before you have enough money and you're confident that you have enough money. But we also don't want to oversave. And for many of us, we might have a number in our mind. And for many folks, that number is $1 million. But how many Americans really have $1 million saved for retirement? You can see here, according to this article by The Ascent, which is a division of the Motley Fool, how many people really save $1 million for retirement. If we go down to that 500,000 to $1 million, that's 4%. $1 million to $5 million, that's another 3.1%. 5 million above, that's 0.1%. So it's fewer than 7.5% of Americans have that saved for retirement. And I don't want you to give up something that matters, which is the youth of your senior years in retirement, maybe for something that may not matter. Many, many of us are going to die with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or maybe even millions of dollars in our retirement account. You want to know where you're at. You don't want to make the leap before you're ready, but if you are ready financially, give it some thought. And until you're ready to make that leap, that's why I made this video up here, which talks about 8 things to stop doing in your 60s in order to enjoy your journey until you get to retire. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.